But you just have to remember. And you'll want to like lean.
I literally didn't prepare.
It doesn't pick up as good as this other one.
Everyone has something printed out. I'm just like, I have two things that I know, but I also printed these out of anxiety. So if we need them, I almost like put the entire packet onto my iPad because I was like, I might have to refer to it. Well, I have these first. Just
Gabi was a service.
Yeah.
Just have it right here.
Okay, cool.
All right, so we'll get started here in just about 5 minutes, 5:56 right now.
What's the answer? You know?
I'm right. Doesn't it look so good?
No. Is it?
I knew he was coming. I'm right. Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to be able to take notes. Yeah. Just like, just in case.
They seem fine now.
You're famous.
I can turn them off.
That's it.
I'm okay.
Can we make more of a circle table so it's like the view?
No.
Or just on you. Yeah, like everything's like pinky just moves their mouth and just. Oh, there's our boy. He always looks fly.
I'm prepared. I can't not prepare, girl. Just freeze up and not say anything, you know? We're doing great. We're doing great.
It'll be fine. We got this. With my notes is, you got this bitch, stay calm, side, breathe it out. That's right? That's why I sent that information video. I just really wanted all of us to see it. Oh, sorry.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get this thing started. My name is Mark Veloz. I'm the Community Resources Specialist here at the Lawrence Public Library. And the library is excited to partner with these local housing experts tonight to bring you a panel discussion about our community's rental housing crisis. And so our goal for tonight is to bring you factual information about the current state of Lawrence's rental housing market, current barriers to obtaining affordable rental housing in our community, and to connect with people who seek compassionate solutions to this crisis. I'm hopeful that tonight's dialogue between our panelists can kind of shed some light on the current landscape of our rental housing market and why so many renters are struggling to obtain affordable rental housing. Tonight's panel is being streamed over Zoom and will be recorded and available on the library's YouTube channel. You also notice that there is a program feedback form on each of your seats, and if you could fill that out and leave it at your seat once the panel is over, that would be greatly appreciated. Now I'd like to turn the mic over to tonight's moderator for the panel, Jasmine Bates, Housing Support Assistant at the Douglas County Housing Stabilization Collaborative. Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you, Mark. All right, hopefully everybody can hear me okay since I have a mic, but if I start to do this, someone please wave at me. As Mark said, I'm at the county right now. My name is Jasmine, and I will introduce our presenter who will present this lovely PowerPoint in just a moment. But first, I do want to do a little temperature check in the room just to see where everybody is coming from, perspectives on housing-wise. So if anybody here is a landlord, if you would raise your hand so we can see we got some landlords in the room, okay? Got a few, great, all right. And then if you're a homeowner, you own your own home, all right, a few more. And then do we have any tenants or people who are looking to rent in Lawrence in the room? Okay, we've got a nice mix. And then how many of you work in like human or social services in the community? Okay, all right, we have people from all the groups, so got a wide array of people to speak to tonight. And now I will say before Gabi starts that we do want to hold audience questions to the end to keep things running smoothly. So Mark mentioned that you have a feedback form on your seat. You also have a blank index card. So if you have any questions, you can write them down and we will collect those. Mark may be available to float throughout and collect them, or we'll take a short break and collect and pick a few of those to go through at the end after the presentation and some planned questions. If anybody is here on Zoom, thank you for being here. And now I'll pass it over to Gabi Boyle, and I will let Gabi introduce themselves.
Perfect. Here. Okay, I've never been good at adjusting microphones. There we go. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Gabi Boyle. I am the prevention specialist at the Sexual Trauma and Abuse Care Center. I have been working on housing policy and research, or housing policy research and advocacy for about 2 years. It may seem kind of unconventional for somebody in my fields to be doing housing advocacy. But there are demonstrated links between violence prevention and housing, and there was a need for this research to be done, so I stepped up. And I want this presentation to kind of provide some frameworks for the conversation that we're going to have tonight. I'm going to share with you some of the research that I've been conducting over the last 2 years with the help of my colleagues. Again, to kind of frame the conversation tonight, this research will be a combination of both local housing statistics, kind of covering what the state of housing is in Lawrence right now as it pertains to rentals, in addition to some national strategies that other communities and municipalities have tried with successes. So with that being said, there we go. Okay, I'm clicking away. Like many other communities across the United States, Lawrence is in the midst of an affordable housing crisis. Rising housing costs have been most burdensome on renters, who represent over half of all households in Lawrence. From 2000 to 2018, rents in Lawrence increased tremendously. Average annual rent increases were about $3,600, while incomes for renters only increased by about $8,000 annually in that same time. So the cost of renting is proportionally outpacing increases in income. While income has increased, about half of that income increase is going towards that rise in rent, and that does not account for other costs of living associated with housing, such as utilities. This relationship between rent and income is even more apparent when we look at the rate of cost burden in Lawrence. Cost burden is a term used to describe the relationship between somebody's income and what they're paying from that income towards rent. So for a renter to be considered cost burden, they are paying over a third or more of their income on rent. In Lawrence, over half of our renters are cost burdened, and about a third of our renters are severely cost burdened, which means that they spend over half of their income on rent. So the rising rental costs, as I mentioned, related to, or as they relate to income increases, are pretty disproportionate, and that is only reflected in a rising rate of cost burden. In addition to those rising costs, renters also face unique challenges that homeowners don't face when it comes to finding, accessing, renting housing that is affordable to them, that meets their needs, that's sustainable. And we're going to talk about those barriers in a moment. But first, I want to recognize that this housing crisis has a disproportionate impact on people who are experiencing systemic marginalization. It's not just a housing crisis, it's also an equity crisis that our community has. Our local trends align with national trends that demonstrate that Black and Indigenous people of color are less likely to be homeowners and are more likely to be renters. In addition, they're more likely to be impacted by homelessness. In Douglas County, Black people are 5 times more likely than white people to experience homelessness, and Indigenous people are 3 times more likely. In a citywide survey conducted recently, 76% of respondents disagreed with the statement that safe and affordable housing is accessible regardless of race. So this is not only something that's like bearing out in the data, that's bearing out in the numbers, but it's also something that people in our community are recognizing and responding to as well. Additionally, Douglas County has a higher amount of women experiencing homeless than the national average. About 51% of homeless individuals in Douglas County are women, and that is 12% higher than the national average. And these statistics come from a recent homeless needs assessment that was conducted by Douglas County in partnership with KU. And then finally, I want to recognize the impact that this crisis has on disabled folks as well. Disabled people are more likely to experience houselessness, are more likely to live in housing that does not meet their needs, that is substandard, and are more likely to rely on rental subsidy programs to pay their rent. 41% of housing choice vouchers in Douglas County, housing choice voucher recipients, are disabled. So I bring these statistics to this conversation because, like I said at the top, I want to provide a bit of a framework for the conversation that we're going to have today. And I think it's important that when we're having conversations about housing solutions, that we're building solutions and considering solutions that address this inequity that is really at the core of the housing crisis, not only in Lawrence, but nationally too. The housing crisis is a systemic issue that is in part generated by systemic racism, sexism, and ableism. So systemic issues require systemic solutions, and systemic solutions are often very complicated and multifaceted. Many community conversations that Lawrence County has been so far have focused on emergency interventions. So things like emergency sheltering or the expansion or development of social service programs that subsidize rent or increase support for those that are experiencing homelessness. Or we've seen a lot of community conversations focused on the development of additional housing as well. While these are extremely important pieces to this like big, multifaceted, complicated solution, they don't address the root causes of the issue. We know that rental costs are probably going to continue to increase again at a rate that is outpacing income increases. And we know that it's going to continue to be hard for folks who have experienced homelessness or who are experiencing housing instability to find housing that meets their needs. So to truly permanently create and sustain affordable housing, we need to look to policies and legislation that ensure that housing becomes and stays affordable and accessible to the most vulnerable people in our community. These policies must be dedicated to removing additional barriers to housing that renters face. So what are those barriers? I'm incredibly privileged in the last 2 years to have built really powerful relationships, not only with my colleagues on the panel today, but also with housing advocates, experts, both in Lawrence, but also nationally. And what folks are noticing is that when it comes to barriers to finding adequate rental housing, there are sort of two major noticeable barriers. The first that I want to focus on is a lack of acceptance of assistance. Very few landlords in Lawrence and just nationally as well participate in rental subsidy programs. So for perspective, there are over 2,000 landlords in Lawrence and only 200 participate in the housing authority programs that we have here, such as the Housing Choice Voucher program. Additionally, many landlords don't accept rental assistance coming from places like CARA, the Kansas Emergency Rental Assistance Fund, or the Housing Stabilization Collaborative. Unfortunately, I don't have like quantifiable statistics for that, but it is something that's been observed by housing providers as well as by folks who are trying to access housing paying using those funds. We have had a lot of community conversations about expanding and continuing these programs, but these programs are reliant on the willingness or the ability of landlords to participate, or of property managers to accept these subsidies. So ultimately, those conversations are going to be wasted if the acceptance rate remains so low. The second barrier I want to focus on is restrictive screening. Part of the process of obtaining housing as a renter is complying with rental application processes, many of which screen tenants on the basis of financial history, rental history, criminal history, employment history, etc. So in a survey of available rental units that I conducted in Lawrence, about 115 units, over half did not work with tenants who had criminal histories, about half did not work with folks who had eviction histories, and nearly all properties had some sort of income or credit score requirement. So these pose barriers in addition to a lack of acceptance of assistance. Someone may find a unit that's affordable to them or that accepts their rental subsidy, but then they may be screened out on the basis of credit score, or they may be screened out on the basis of a lack of rental history. So given these barriers, what are the solution? A group of housing experts and advocates, again, some of whom are here today, some of whom I see in the audience, have been kind of focusing on two possible solutions to address these barriers. The first is creating protections against source of income discrimination, and the second is encouraging inclusive screening practices. So source of income discrimination describes when a landlord or a property manager or property owner refuses to either rent to a tenant or accept rent payments because of where the money is coming from. So that could look like refusing to rent to someone who's paying rent using a rental subsidy, or refusing to rent to somebody who's paying using income from a certain type of profession, who's paying with assistance from their family or mutual aid funds, things like that. And the second is, again, that inclusive screening practices, which means creating guidelines for why, how, and when landlords can refuse to rent to a prospective tenant. So this would improve, like inclusive screening practices would improve transparency through the renting process, through the screening process, and reduce the opportunity for any sort of discrimination or bias that may come up in that screening practice. These policies were not just something that we all dreamed up collectively, although I wish we could take credit for them. They've been backed by a really strong body of research. They've been recommended by dozens of national organizations, including the American Bar Association, the Poverty and Race Research Action Council, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And they're also things that other communities are implementing successfully as well. Over 20 states and 100 municipalities have passed protections similar to these. So what sort of impact could these have in Lawrence, you may find yourself asking? That is a great question. They have the potential to have a huge impact in our community. More people than ever are relying on housing choice vouchers, rental assistance, and community support to pay their rent, particularly in the fallout of COVID-19. As a snapshot, in September of last year, Douglas County had 822 households using vouchers, and there were 412 households on the waiting list with a wait of about 2 years. Part of the reason that that waiting list to be housed is so long is that lack of acceptance of vouchers, or an acceptance of vouchers, but a lack of acceptance on other grounds such as credit score, rental history, criminal history, etc. Additionally, we have a high and rising number of households receiving rental assistance through programs such as the Housing Stabilization Collaborative here in Douglas County. And those assistance funds continue to be administered as they are available. So the success of these programs, again, the success of their ability to keep someone housed, to get somebody housed, really do depend on the acceptance of these programs in our community. I also want to talk about the impact of restrictive screening practices and the impact that inclusive screening practices could have. Oftentimes, screening practices are informed by ideas that we can trace back to things like discrimination against folks experiencing generational poverty, systemic racism, or just general cycles of housing instability. Creating protections for source of income is essential, but additional protections would be needed. Again, just because somebody finds a property manager willing to accept their rental assistance doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to be screened into that property. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that restrictive screening practices are ineffective at retaining tenants and additionally allow room for individual discrimination. I want to briefly discuss some of the disproportionate impact that kind of the top 3 screening factors in Douglas County have on those who are experiencing marginalization. And these factors and their impact on those who are experiencing marginalization, particularly Black and Indigenous people of color, women and disabled folks, may be part of the reason why we do see such major housing disparities in Douglas County. So when it comes to screening for criminal history, this has a marked impact specifically on Black households. We know that Black households, Black individuals are more likely to have interactions with the criminal justice system, primarily due to discriminatory policing and justice practices, and that is no different in Douglas County. Black folks are 6.5 times more likely to be incarcerated than white people, which has increased nearly 40% since 2020 and continues to rise. And again, this is on track with what we're seeing nationally as well. Researchers, housing advocates have recognized the disparate impact of screening for criminal history, therefore, primarily on Black households, but also on Indigenous households and Latinx households who have high rates of incarceration as well. Actually, in 2022, the Department of Housing and Urban Development encouraged housing providers to create screening practices that are more accepting of individuals with criminal histories, recognizing the impact that these practices and these screening regulations have. And municipalities nationwide have done just that, have again created protections for those who have criminal histories looking for housing, or who have helped to create funding to house somebody exiting the criminal justice system or exiting incarceration. When it comes to credit score screening, it's been well documented by organizations such as the National Consumer Law Center, the National Fair Housing Alliance, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, that our credit score system as it stands now is racially disparaging. The reasons for this are very complicated and numerous. If that's something that you're interested in, I have amassed a collection of PDFs, so let me know after the program. But to condense it, many of the factors that are taken into consideration when it comes to calculating credit scores, such as student debt, medical debt, credit card debt, and even something like frequent address changes, are more likely to burden Black and Indigenous people of color, again, particularly Black and Latinx people who on average have more student debt and medical debt than white people, who are more likely to have frequent address changes due to cycles of housing instability. It's all connected. And then the historical racial wealth gap, as well as predatory lending strategies that target people who do not have access to generational wealth, have contributed to Black and Indigenous people of color having on average more credit card debt than white individuals. I want to highlight that credit scores are not related to rental payment. The payment of rent is not taken into account when calculating a credit score. There has been no research to suggest that credit scores are an accurate reflection of somebody's ability to pay rent. And in fact, there is research to suggest that somebody who has a poor credit score may be more likely to be able to make mortgage payments on time when they transition out of rentership, primarily because most people pay rent with their immediate income first and put other household costs such as groceries, utilities, medical expenses, etc., onto a credit card, therefore increasing their credit card debt, lowering their credit score. Considering that this is such a huge screening factor in Lawrence specifically, I find this information, again, very fascinating and salient Like I said, I've got the PDF link up if you want it. And then finally, a word on rental history and eviction rates. Eviction, as you all may not be surprised to hear at this point, disproportionately affects people who are experiencing marginalization. In a 2020 study conducted by Princeton University's eviction lab, Latinx and Black tenants, particularly women, were found to have eviction rates filed against them at proportionally higher rates. Even though they represented a small amount of the sample in the study, they had evictions filed against them at nearly double the rate of white tenants. Within those demographic groups, women were more likely to be filed against than men. Even if eviction does not result in a loss of housing, they are still extremely harmful for tenants. They're expensive. The eviction lab study found that the court fees that can result from serial evictions, which is when an individual at one address has evictions filed against them over and over, on average increase housing costs by way of court fees and fines as much as 20%. An eviction on your record, or even just an unfavorable relationship with the previous landlord reference, is going to make it that much harder to find housing in the future. And additionally, this is why advocating for something like a right to counsel program, which would guarantee tenants legal counsel in eviction cases, is so important, in addition to the solutions that we've already talked about. Right to counsel pilot programs that have been piloted in other communities have demonstrated that having counsel is more likely to lead to a favorable eviction outcome for a tenant, including less or more chance of retaining housing, less likelihood of the eviction remaining on their record, and more positive reconciliation with landlords. So that's another solution that could be potentially investigated in Douglas County as well. So that's all the information that I have, kind of again to frame up like a very condensed past 2 years in housing conversations history to frame up today's conversation. I want to really reiterate that everybody deserves housing in our community. We want to have a community where everyone can be our neighbor, where everyone can feel safe, successful, and stable. And working towards solving the housing crisis does mean looking upstream towards some of the solutions that I've described today. I appreciate you all taking the time to listen to me. If you're on Zoom, I appreciate you as well. And again, thank you for being here. Thanks, Jazz.
Oh, sure. So you're fine. Oh, you did amazing, Gabi. That was, I had read that presentation, but can we get just like another little bit of clapping for Gabi? Because wow, so many numbers. So many numbers. So it's okay if you did not absorb all of that. I did see a few people trickle in late, so I want to do a reminder that we are holding questions until the end. There are some little blank index cards on your chair and hopefully a pencil so you can write, if not borrow one from someone next to you. And we'll select a few of those at the end. But now I want to go ahead and start talking with our panelists and having a little bit more of a discussion. So those of you who are like, your math brain got overwhelmed a while ago, this should be a little bit less like percentages heavy during this part. So again, I'll start with introducing myself and then I'll pass it over to each of you. We can just go down the line. So I'm Jasmine. Mark did introduce me at the beginning. I'm currently an AmeriCorps member at Douglas County, Kansas government. I work really closely with all of these folks, especially Gabi Sprague, who's second from the end down there. We share an office, so we work very closely together. And if each of you can introduce yourself, organization, and then also maybe just like, are you a renter? Are you a homeowner? Similar to the temperature check we did with the audience.
Hi, y'all. It's me again. My name is Gabi Boyle. I am the prevention specialist at the Sexual Trauma and Abuse Care Center. I work on community engagement education at the care center, but additionally, I am subcontracted by the CDC to research and advocate for solutions to social economic factors that might contribute to violence in our community. So that's kind of what brings me to the table. And I rent. I'm actually not from Lawrence. I've only been here for like 4 years and it's wonderful. So thank you all for making it wonderful. Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Mariel Ferreiro. I am from the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority. I'm the Landlord Liaison. So I work closely with our program participants and our landlords to ensure that relationship building is possible and that we house as many of our voucher recipients as possible. I do have the privilege of owning a home, but have rented in Douglas County and have extensive experience with renting and also grassroots organizing around housing justice and homelessness. Very excited to be here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Savannah Fergus. I've been with the Lawrence Community Shelter for like 2.5 years. I've been with their housing program for 1.5 years now. I'm a renter. I'm born and raised in Lawrence, so renting in Lawrence is something that is very personal to me and that we've been working on very hard. All of us have, so that's why I'm here. Thank you.
My name is Gabi Sprague. I'm the Human Services Program Manager for Douglas County. I came on to the county in February of this year. I had previously worked for the United Way of Douglas County doing a program called the Housing Stabilization Collaborative that we've talked about a little bit. That's primarily a large rent utility assistance program, and I've been looking at other eviction prevention measures, sort of developing a toolbox in our community to prevent eviction.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kincaid Dennett. I'm the Executive Director of People's Owned and Operated Collective Housing. We are a 52-member cooperative serving the Oriad neighborhood primarily. We also primarily serve LGBT plus and low income individuals. And also I'm here as a community organizer who got my entrance into it in food justice and then started to realize all of these things are connected and moved quickly to incorporate housing justice into my work. So thank you for hosting this panel. I'm excited to be here.
Yay. Okay, awesome. I love all of these people so much. So I'm getting really smiley. I am going to stay on our questions though. So Gabi presented on like a really broad topic, big issue facing our community. And it's really clear that there is data that's backing up these solutions, like specific ones. So I'm going to say source of income, and I'm guessing that we might say SOI. That's what we mean if we say that. And then inclusive screening criteria, or we'll probably just refer to it as inclusive screening. And then right to counsel, which is, again, when you're getting evicted, landlords are often represented by lawyers, tenants are not. So it's making sure that both parties get represented equally in court. So with that, I just want to hear from each of the panelists, kind of discuss from your perspectives and your particular work, why do we need these in Lawrence and what would those benefits of it be to your work? Whoever wants to take that first.
Yeah, again, I feel like I said quite a bit in my presentation, so I'll keep my answer brief so that we can hear some other voices. But I think it's important to address solutions that target renters and increase protections for renters because we have such a high population of renters in Lawrence, again, over half. And additionally, because we know that folks who are renting often are struggling with other points of marginalization as well that I mentioned. So I think that these solutions are not only practical in terms of we have more renters than we do homeowners, but also really center equity, which is something that I think is important to Lawrence, right? Is important to our community, is something that the city has recognized, even in their strategic planning documents. So yeah, I guess that's what I would add in addition to all of the numbers in the presentation, which I'm sorry about those numbers.
No, it was great. I was just being light.
Well, I'm about to hit you with more numbers, so I apologize. So my work with the Douglas County Housing Authority, we administer the housing choice vouchers in addition to transitional vouchers, which is a program that we have had the fortune to create that assists folks who are experiencing homelessness, transition out of homelessness, and then ultimately join the program. It's a 2-year transitional program that they're on, that they receive voucher assistance, and then they graduate to a housing choice voucher. And that allows them to build rental history, that allows them to acclimate from experiencing homelessness long-term homelessness to housing. And so what we've been experiencing at the Housing Authority is definitely tracking with the national numbers and just this idea of we're experiencing this housing crisis. So providing subsidy, first and foremost, is a government payment to landlords for rent. So it is a guaranteed monthly payment of subsidy, so guaranteed rent. But what we've been noticing and recognizing is a trend down in the utilization of our vouchers. And a lot of that has been to the inability for our voucher recipients to find adequate housing. Typically, on a monthly basis, we see folks who have a voucher in their hand and out and looking. There's about 20 households that are looking. In the past year, we have seen numbers as high as 70 households looking for housing and unable to find housing. Right now, as of the end of this month going into December, we have 51 households that are actively searching for housing and that are struggling to find housing. Our voucher utilization, we are what we call a high utilization agency. So we're typically in the 99 to 98 percentile. We've seen a drop to 94%. And while that doesn't seem incredibly significant, if you look at 90 to 99 to 94, it is huge for us. That also shows to HUD that we're not utilizing our vouchers, which puts us at risk for not receiving more funding. And as mentioned in the presentation, having a 400 individual household plus wait list that is about 2 years, that will only increase. And so what the need is right now is more participation from landlords. That another statistic that was brought up was the rental licensing in town, about 2,500 unique rental licensing in the city of Lawrence. Overall in Douglas County, we have a little over 250 active landlords. So about 10% is what we see as active participating landlords in our program, which is incredibly low. So my job and my passion and drive in this is to really get more landlords onto the program, to educate them about what it means to house folks who receive subsidy and really dispel some myths. And I think something like source of income can be that accountability factor, can be that way to show that we do not need to discriminate based on who is receiving or how they're receiving their funding for housing. Just need to house people, and that the folks that receive vouchers are no different than anyone else. And so that is why I'm here, why I believe source of income is an important protected class to not only support our current landlords who participate in the program, and we're thankful for them and continue to work for them, but to show that we need more landlords on board with us. And I am grateful to be in this position to go ahead and help be that bridge and that connection to landlords to participate.
At the shelter, we work with a few different types of housing. We hook people up with the Housing Authority. We work with a federal grant, rapid rehousing. And like we've all said, we've all seen landlords incredibly decrease their utilage in any of these programs in the last year or so. And what we see is landlords or people staying at shelter longer and longer. And when you're in shelter, it's a traumatizing experience. And the longer you're there, the more traumatized you are. And if we can't find them housing, the longer you're at the shelter. And another thing about this I wanted to bring up is that you don't have to be in a shelter to be housed. You can be housed from the street. And I think using something like source of income is helpful for those who don't even want to be in a shelter, who don't want to go through that path. So I think source of income would help not only our unhoused population, but all people, all renters in Lawrence.
I want to harp on a couple things. Gabi mentioned quite a bit about the disparities in our housing situation here and how source of income would affect that. I believe that housing is a human right, the same as food, the same as water. And I truly believe that source of income is a step in a direction that our community can take to achieve the goal of everyone being housed. Another thing that I want to harp on is that it's much cheaper for our community to house people and prevent homelessness than it is to bring a person out of homelessness. Shelter that Savannah works at, it costs quite a bit of money to keep that running, and it's our tax dollars that are paying for this as well. Another thing that is kind of tangentially related is that large developers will, or not developers, but large property management companies will come in into our community, be new to our community, and then refuse to take vouchers. And I think just as a community, we should be able to, if people come into our community, we should have our own set of rules that people should abide by. And we want, as a community, to house everybody. So I think that folks who are coming in, particularly large management companies that can house a lot of people, should be privy to those rules before coming into this space.
And to spare y'all repeating all of the excellent points my colleagues made, I will ask, I do believe that housing is a human right, and I want to know how many other people in this room feel that way.
Ooh,
We're in good company.
there we go.
And so that's the short answer of why this is important, because housing is a human right, and we live in a community where the spirit of this city and county can set the tone for how people are treated throughout the region. And so we have an opportunity and a responsibility to set that tone here.
Thank you all. Those are amazing answers. So I'm hearing this is going to make things much better if we can get this passed, and for over 50% of the population here, because so many people are renting, right? So, and it sounds like, thank you for doing that temperature check in the audience about right to housing. That's great, because I think we're in really good company here to talk about what is the anticipated or existing opposition to these changes. I think maybe folks have an idea from what we've talked about already with landlords that are not accepting vouchers or not accepting rent assistance. But what kind of opposition are you all expecting to face in trying to get these ordinance changes, which is what they are at the root, is an ordinance change at the city level? What opposition do you expect? And let's start at the other end. Let's do Kincaid first and then go back.
So opposition that I personally feel like I anticipate is a general culture of distrust between landlords, renters, unhoused people, where we don't understand ourselves as a community of people that need to work together to solve these problems. We need to rather figure out ways that we can work together instead of viewing each other as like adversaries in these sorts of situations.
And I can expand on that just a little bit in regards to social service agencies and landlords. We're often, I think, positioned as social service agencies as like pro-tenant, and that's true. Whereas I also see the, what landlords experience as well and the difficulties that they experience. I won't get too much into it because I know Mariel, that's like her job. So I'm going to let her speak to that pretty frequently or a lot. But I just wanted to say that I think that when there's pushback against source of income protections, specifically regarding housing choice vouchers, there's just a misunderstanding of what the program is. I manage a little bit of property. I live in the co-op that Kincaid is the executive director for, and I do a lot of the finances for the organization. And we use the Kansas Emergency Rental Assistance Program for the entire 18 months that it was available for folks. Many of the people that live with us struggled throughout the pandemic and were eligible for that program. And it's just guaranteed rent. And that's the exact same thing that tenant-based rental assistance programs are. But again, I won't talk about it super in depth.
I also agree, guys. I think the opposition is, I think we need to review how we look at property versus people. I think we need to be looking at people over property. And I understand landlords, where they're coming from, but also understanding that when you own a property, it is a risk and it is an investment that you made. And I think while we are, like you said, pro-tenant, there are things in place to protect landlords and protect their bottom line. And ideally, we would want to work in contingent with landlords and not feel like a constant fight with landlords and constantly arguing and advocating. But I'll let Mariel get into landlord incentives.
Goodness, I feel like this is my question. So as I mentioned, I'm the landlord liaison, and this was a very intentional position created that has been, I would say, in the last 5 to 10 years, we have been looking at how we can start bridging this gap. And when I think of systems changes and how they affect people, I think of a flip side. I think of how do we create partnership in this? How do we create a mutual understanding and shift not only culture, but the power dynamic that exists? And so what my responsibility is, not only in my job, but just as a personal responsibility, is to educate. What we can do to come up against opposition is providing education on what housing choice vouchers are. We have so many landlords that I would say are champions of this program that have provided housing in exchange for subsidy and that have had success stories. Now, we will always experience the 10% that of housing situations that maybe did not go so good, right? That's just the reality of the game. And what I have pledged to do in my job and my role is to mitigate that. I mitigate by creating incentive fundings. We've been granted hundreds of thousands of dollars via the federal government, the city and county buy-in from all of our stakeholders to incentivize landlords to say, hey, we understand that you might be taking on a risk. We understand that this is a business for you, and that is your vested interest, and we respect that. How do we meet everybody where they are, including tenants, social service providers, and landlords, and how do we build a path forward? So for me, it's been creating mitigation funding, which we are currently providing to landlords, and we'll continue to expand on that. And also education. I intend, in addition, if we decide to do systems changes as a community, as a city of Lawrence, and pass source of income, to provide intentional training for landlords, intentional education to dispel any myths, to say that voucher recipients are no different and are your neighbors. You know, they could be the person sitting next to you, and that's the thing. It doesn't matter who it is or what intersections they may have. They deserve housing, and they're receiving assistance so they can be successful in their housing. So that is my work, that is my passion, and that is something I will consistently advocate for. And I know that the landlords that are in our program understand that. And I'm very excited to invite more in to have that conversation so we can start dispelling any sort of myths that may exist and start inviting people into the community conversation of how we make affordable housing a reality.
You all said it so beautifully, but I think, of course, there's going to be anticipated opposition to any change, any social change, any major community change. But I guess I think this has been said by most everyone really, but instead of imagining opposition, I would rather imagine opportunity. I mean, what we have with these policies, with these systems changes, is an incredible opportunity to create that community that Kincaid was referring to, right? To empower property owners, to empower landlords, to empower people who have made that investment, to build a community that's stronger, that's safer, that's more secure, that's more stable for everyone. I mean, I think maybe that's just sort of like kumbaya, but I think that's a really incredible opportunity that we have. And it's understandable when there's opposition. As Savannah mentioned, as Mariel mentioned, right? A lot of these programs are unfamiliar. A lot of these policies are unfamiliar, but there will be supports. And again, I think it's just really lovely to imagine a community where those who have resources that they can share, do share them. And those who need resources have folks that they can turn to. Yeah.
That was awesome. Thank you all. And thank you, Gabby, for ending on a hopeful note there. That was really great. Bringing it back. So, okay, so far, I think we kind of answered the what resources can landlords use. I'm sure that Mariel can talk more if there are any landlords in the audience who are feeling concerned or apprehensive. That is Mariel's whole job, and she'd be happy to get in depth with how to apply for the programs, how much money there is, how you get it. But I want to talk for a moment to the homeowners in the audience who are not landlords and are not renting and are not going to engage with this at all. And I think we've addressed a little bit, but like, what is your perspective on why would the homeowners be really concerned about issues like this? How is it going to impact their day-to-day life? You know, beyond the I would like to live in a better community sort of large picture dream that a lot of people have. How is it going to impact them when they're going to work and, you know, taking their kids to school and daycare and doing all the things that they need to do? So if we want to do the same thing and swap and start with Gabby, do you want to do that? Okay.
Well, I know I just ended on a hopeful note, but maybe this is a little less hopeful, which is that home ownership, housing security, housing stability can be temporary. It's something that may not be permanent. It's something that may not be lasting. There are always people who are transitioning from being renters to homeowners, homeowners back to renters. And so what these changes do is create a safety net for folks, no matter where they're at in our community. It's possible that somebody who finds themselves in the position of a homeowner now may find themselves in the position of a renter in the next few months even, right? Like life changes constantly. And so what these protections do is, again, beyond like that, like happy, hopeful, creating a community for everybody, they create protections for everybody, regardless of who you are. And so while they may not have a direct, tangible, like I feel this every day, waking up, taking my kids to school, running my errands, etc., impact, I hope that they would have the impact of feeling more secure, of feeling that if you're ever in that position where you do become a renter or are facing housing instability, that there will be protections created for you, even if you don't need them at this very moment.
That's such a great answer, Gabby. Thank you. In addition to that, I think it's very evident through the conversations that we've been having on a city and county level that we are not only experiencing affordable housing crisis, but we're experiencing just a housing crisis, and the fact that we are seeing more people experiencing homelessness now more than ever. What we do as social service providers is start bridging the gap and saying that regardless of your housing situation, whether you are housed, whether you own, whether you're experiencing homelessness, housing is something that needs to be provided to you so you can gain access to other services. You know, folks experience a myriad of issues and of struggles in life, and housing shouldn't be one of those. That shouldn't be the obstacle, and it shouldn't be something that is reserved for a certain group of folks. It should be accessible to everyone. And I think just thinking about the conversations we've been having in community and the concerns we've been seeing from the community, specifically around homelessness, is those folks have a stake in this conversation. Those folks have a right to housing, and we need to start addressing as a community the realities of how we get more folks into the space of housing, and how we get more folks the autonomy to make the decision to move to housing. And we have to have the spaces for that. Source of income is one of the tools we can utilize to say, yes, you absolutely, as a community, we say housing is your right. Let's use the social service agency tools and the resources that we have as a community to get you into that space, and let it not be an obstacle of just saying no for the sake of saying no. Let's get you housed. And so that in of itself, to me, is just essentially the space of why we should care. Because like Gabi said, we can all be in that position, but also it's in the space of, this is something that a goal we should all obtain, and something that we can eradicate as far as housing insecurity. We can do that. So let's do everything in our power to move in that direction.
I completely agree. And I think we've all said it, and we're probably going to say it a million times, but housing is a human right. And I would probably believe most people in here that are homeowners have rented at some point. And I would just say that it is completely different than it was years ago. COVID changed things, inflation changed things. Rents are at probably all-time high in Lawrence, and it's fair market rent for a one bedroom is $753, and to make 3 times that rent, you would have to make $14 an hour full time, which if you are disabled on Social Security, that is not feasible. So I think homeowners should be concerned about this because it's a human rights issue, and this is our community, these are our neighbors, and should be important to everybody here.
I think we've talked a lot about why homeowners should care about their fellow person or fellow community member here, but I do want to talk about so along with these changes that are coming to the city, which I think we'll talk about some more, there's a specific change to Chapter 13 or Article 13 that will, so we can say we have source of income protections, but like, what does that look like? And it's construction of city positions or positions somewhere that hold people accountable to that and create more programming just for housing supports in general. I could see a future in which the construction of these positions continues on and we get even further support for housing supports, and that can include supports for homeowners as well. So I think a benefit for some is a benefit for all in the long run.
Completely agree. And I think like principally like when we raise the floor of like how difficult life can be for people, then the ceiling gets higher. So what benefits the people at the bottom also benefits the people at the top. And I think we need to depart from the mindset of somebody getting something means something is being taken away from me. And then even more practically, we have, is it 57% of Lawrence residents are renters?
56.
56?
As of 2018, it's probably increased.
It's probably gone up since then. So when resources are stretched for renters, people spend less money in the community. If you're a homeowner who's a business owner, people are buying less from you. If you're a homeowner who works for a restaurant or works in another place downtown, your shifts are going to be getting cut because less people have less cash to fly into the system. So there's a two-part, one that's kind of pie in the sky and one that's a little bit more like, we just need to give people more money.
Yeah, and along with that, what Kincaid said, I want to point out, I think Savannah said like $14 an hour full time. We have paraeducators in our school district who are relying on to educate children who are making less than that, or people who are not getting full-time hours. And so then what happens when you are trying to have a family in this community and the teacher of your child is experiencing housing instability, you know, that stress ends up impacting your child and impacting you. So I think it's just a reality that we're all interconnected and we all need housing. We do have one last planned question before we take a little break. So do you all feel like bearing with us for another minute? I saw a couple yawns. I know we've been sitting for a really long time. Feel free to like move around, walk around, go drink out of the water fountain. It will not bother us. But the last question was really just kind of, I want to hear all of you talk about, we've kind of harped on a couple solutions and a lot of data behind them. So clearly, hopefully we're all on board with those. What are other things that you hope to see or that you would like to see in housing in Lawrence? And what would a Lawrence with those look like? And I'll let anybody take it. If we want to have Savannah start from the middle, Mariel's going, like, go for it.
Sure. So I think a big thing would be to just have these conversations with your friends and your family, because it starts with all of you and it starts with the community, and dispelling these rumors that we all know are true we all know are not true, and just starting those conversations where you can and advocating where you can, because everyone here has something they can give, and starting those conversations where you can is something you can tangibly do today, tonight, tomorrow, every single day.
And I'm so sorry, Savannah, I skipped a question on you and you answered the question you were supposed to, which is, how can we advocate for this? So yeah, sorry guys.
I'm going to answer both. My dream for housing is to not have a one solution for housing, but to have various housing models that fit everyone's need. We are working on that as a community, and we will not I will not stop. I know these people on the panel will not stop. I know a lot of stakeholders in the community will not stop until people not only have housing, but have the housing that suits them and have the services that they need met. So that is my dream for housing, that not only we're all housed, but we're all housed in a way that is suitable for us. What you can do is, you're right here, you've started. You've participated in this. We'll have more discussion after a break. Come and talk to us more about this. Come to the Housing Authority if you're a landlord, if you're someone in need of subsidy, and let's have a conversation about what it means to get on board with these. And more emergent and maybe more immediate is source of income is going to be discussed at the city level in the next few weeks. Starting next Tuesday, December 13th, there will be a presentation by the group that has been, and several of my colleagues on here that have been working to create the revisions to Chapter 10, which is the Anti-Discrimination Ordinance, and Article 13, which will be the implementation process. I encourage you to come to that meeting, learn about what specific education that you need and specific changes that will be happening, and make your voice heard. Public comment, writing letters to your commission in support of these changes will only add to the momentum of not only using this as a tool to get us to where we need to be, but also saying, I want this and I want more, because this is not where we stop. This is where we start.
I was kind of inspired by what Gabi and Kincaid at the other end of the table mentioned, that I want to sort of highlight again in terms of a vision for housing. My vision is that when it rains, it pours. When we make one positive change, we open up so many more conversations to make other positive changes, right? I mean, I think there are so many areas of housing protections that could be improved, whether that's, there are many folks in Lawrence living in substandard housing, making sure that those folks have access to the repairs that they need, that they can afford the repairs that they need, helping property owners, property managers, landlords improve their properties for their tenants as well. I mean, I think that that's a conversation that would be so complementary to the conversation that we're having today, right? Again, I think when it rains, it pours, not just like improvements in housing, but in the condition of living overall, as Kincaid was mentioning earlier, right? Like when the floor raises, the ceiling raises. And then in terms of if this is something that you feel really moved by, that you want to advocate for, I think, as Mariel said, like that December 13th meeting will be nitty gritty, the nitty gritty of it all. We'll have colleagues presenting, and then continuing this conversation with the city again, like, Lawrence is a wonderful community because our city commissioners are very accessible. The folks on this panel, housing experts, housing advocates, are really accessible. Ask questions, connect with commissioners, ask them to show up for housing in the same way that you're showing up tonight, right? Yeah, that's what I dream.
I want to answer the actual question that was asked that I skipped over. I think my ideal world of housing is, like you said, so much more of it, and so many different kinds of it. We currently don't have a permanent supportive housing model, which is what a lot of people at the shelter and that are unhoused need. And we don't have it. We don't have the supports in place for those individuals. And I think my ideal world of housing is so much of it that we can easily get people into it without having to stay at a shelter, and that it should be rare and brief, unlike it is now, where it's common, repetitive, and for a long time.
I have 3 things-ish. So yeah, definitely attend the December 13th City Commission meeting next week, where we'll be presenting on source of income changes. I am also working at the district court level and the county level to develop a tenant legal representation pilot program. So I'm currently looking for funding to fund 1 lawyer and 1 paralegal to provide tenant legal representation in eviction court. So nationally, 80% of landlords have legal representation, whereas only 3% of tenants do. And that's pretty representative of what it looks like at our county level as well. So we can plug in at the county level there. Another thing that I want to highlight is that the city is going through land development codes. We just need more affordable housing, and our land development code is a little too restrictive right now to even develop that. Some things that have been talked about are an affordable housing overlay, basically incentivizing developers to develop affordable housing and loosening some of those restrictions for developing affordable housing. So I would encourage anyone, the committee met today, so we can't attend that meeting, I guess, but there will be meetings in the future, and so I would watch the City of Lawrence just for information regarding that. I also want to encourage anyone, if you didn't see the sign-up sheet, you can put your email there for more information for the future. So if you didn't see that, please fill that out.
Yeah, and I totally want to agree with what Gabby said. Like, my baseline dream for affordable housing in Lawrence is that we increase the stock of affordable housing in Lawrence. And I think that we can do that through using a diversity of tactics. And I do have to plug cooperatives. Housing cooperatives are an amazing democratic model that allow people to take ownership of their own living space in a way that I find really inspirational and amazing. And you can always check out peopleshousing.org to learn more about our particular housing cooperative in Lawrence. I do think, to answer the other question, and since I plugged cooperatives as a cooperative director, and now I'm going to plug organizing as an organizer, we can get organized. Like, we can make these changes. Like my other panelists said, like, you've already taken the first step to making these changes by gathering here today. We have amazing folks in the city and county who are trying to make these changes and want to make these changes, and they need our support to know that we want this and we can make it better together. So I think, yes, sign up. I will send you not too many emails. I will send you an appropriate amount of emails to let you know about where you can plug in to these efforts to make our community more equitable and just.
And I want to note one thing in regard to the cooperative model. At the development code right now, it's that, I think it's in the development code anyway, no more than 3 people who are unrelated can live together. Luckily, the co-op that we live in was kind of grandfathered into that rule, but the way that we live isn't even allowable anymore. So that would be another change that I would highlight in the development code.
Did we all get a chance to answer? I was so caught up. I think
Yeah.
we all did. Great. Okay. So we'll take a break in a second. I will highlight a couple things that were said about taking action. One is that Lisa Larson, who's our mayor now, did highlight that land development code in her little speech when she took on the mayorship again. So I know that's a big priority at the city, and I'm sure that if you're not sure where to find that information, you can reach out to Lisa and find out more. And then public comment, if you're nervous at all about making public comment, if you haven't done it before, you can do it in writing, and it's due like the day before. If you need help drafting that, you're welcome to talk to me. I'm also going to go to the city commission meeting on the 13th in person, and I'll be there specifically just to support people in making public comment, because I get anxious public speaking, and it's even more intimidating when you know that you're being broadcast on Zoom on like the public television and like talking to your officials and stuff. It's like, it's scary. So I'm there to support anybody who wants to advocate for these changes. And with that, we're going to take a little break. We're running really good on time because we have the space for another hour. So I think we could safely take 5 to 10 minutes, go walk around, stretch, go breathe in some fresh air. And we'll come back here around 7:10.
We should hide in the back so nobody talks to us. I don't want to talk to us. Hide in the back so nobody talks to us. It's really great. This is good. It went well.
Hi, just letting everybody know we're about wrapping up on that break, so mingle on back to your seat. Panelists, come on back to the stage, and we will pick a few audience questions. If you have a question card with a question on it, please pass it to me or to Mark.
The mics are on. Yeah.
I like these.
I want to.
I like those.
You like this one? Okay.
Is this the?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Okay,
Yep,
cool.
yep.
What is a housing mix? It says what's a housing code.
It's for chickens.
Yes. She's like, I already did. She's good. Oh, that's just nice.
Until she sees me.
Is this on? Okay, it's on. Okay, I think most of us are back. Thank you for sticking with us after the break even. So let's see, what is this one that Gabi Sprague handed me? Not that it's her question, she's on the panel, but she liked it. So it says, I wish there was funding available to provide regular incentives to landlords who do not contribute to increasing homelessness through discriminatory evictions, rent hikes, or refusing to maintain safe, healthy properties. So it's a little bit more of a comment, but
Other side.
other side, oh no, oh goodness. Well, that was a great comment. How open are city and government leaders to the development of programs mentioned tonight? Was that the one you're hoping for?
Yeah, both of those.
And the second part is coordinated community response a path that is being considered to moving forward with housing changes? And if so, how would this best be utilized to achieve these goals?
Yeah, we're like, yes.
I think about you and me primarily.
Yeah, okay, let's do it.
But, so the first question, I think we have a lot of folks at government right now that are invested in affordable housing. It's in the city's strategic plan. It's a focus of Douglas County government as well. I think that we have a lot of support for this, and it just takes the community members to come to a space and tell people what we want. The other part of the question was, is there a coordinated community response? I can only speak from my perspective as a social service provider at Douglas County, but there is a group of folks getting together a housing plan for the next however many years. 5 years, and that will be coming to the community for community response and input. So we're looking to do a coordinated effort among all of the social service agencies, in addition to community members like yourselves, input onto that as well. So there is somewhat of a coordinated community response to this, I would say.
Yeah, so I appreciate the comment about landlord incentives, not exclusive to folks experiencing homelessness, which that is, I mean, I think what Kincaid, and I'll keep going back to that comment, if we raise the floor, we raise the ceiling. So that is where we started. But when I mentioned we received an additional $100,000 plus in incentives, that was in partnership of the Douglas County awarding us $50,000 and my agency, the Housing Authority, putting it in our plan to increase landlord incentives. That will be for folks who have vouchers and folks who are just needing access to housing. The Housing Stabilization Collaborative has also received landlord incentive funding to help meet the gap or fill the gap of anybody who is needing that little extra support in incentivizing landlords. So I have the money. We just need to get it out. And we piloted that program primarily to show that we can get landlords on board, work together. Like I said, there's even landlords in the room tonight who have had the opportunity to utilize those incentives, and we want to expand on that. So that is definitely, we don't want to be exclusive. We want to include as many. And so I think that pilot project really showed the need, and we're putting more of those resources. As Gabi mentioned, there's a homeless and housing stakeholders group that has been created that is developing a 5-year plus strategic plan around quite a bit of focused content, including affordable housing and homelessness. And the intention is to develop that strategic plan and have community focus group sessions where we talk about it, where we provide education, where we really level with folks and say, here's the information, here's the education, here's what we know as, experts in the field, or, how, whatever we want to call ourselves. Also bringing in folks with lived experience who can self-advocate and say, this is where I am in this space and this is what I need, because we cannot be experts if we do not have lived experience in addition to that. And so with that, we will be coming back to the community in 2023, early 2023, to have those discussions, to get your input on the strategic plan so we can move together, because we cannot do this by ourselves. We do not want to do this by ourselves. We want to do this with everyone, and we want to infuse the idea of equity and inclusion in every single piece that we do, and that is a major focus area. So that is where we will plug in and hopefully get some buy-in from the community, because this is just as much yours as it is everyone else's. So you have a stake in this, each and every person. So I look forward to that opportunity to have those community conversations.
Awesome. I think that is a really great, everyone's nodding. So does anyone have anything to add?
We nailed it.
Okay, nailed it. There we go. I will just say that really addressed a question someone else asked, which was how can those affected by poverty or homelessness be more involved in the city planning and designing process? And I think the answer is that the city and the county do a lot of community engagement before they do things. A lot of times that's surveys or these meetings that Mariel's talking about. So if you want to talk more about specifically.
I will also add that the Homeless Services Division and Housing Services Division of the city has been having meetings around emergency services regarding camping and sheltering. Those are open meetings. Those are every other Thursday at 9 in the morning. And those are open to folks. So if you're interested, if you want to catch me after the meeting or pick up a business card and you want to get involved in those conversations, please. I mean, we need community members in there. Otherwise, it's just us talking at each other. Having folks with lived experience too, I firmly believe in the idea of compensation for your labor and for your experience. And so that is something we're also developing, is how do we provide equitable compensation for folks who are providing their lived expertise. So there's a lot of good coming with that work, and I invite you into those spaces because, again, you have ownership over that. That is yours just as much as ours.
Awesome, great. And I love that you just had all that ready. You guys are clearly experts. So kind of circling back a little bit to clearly we're very targeted on this source of income a little bit because it is so pressing right now. And we have a couple questions that are specifically about that. So I'll read those and then let you all answer within your expertise. I will say that the presentation next week at the City Commission meeting, Katie Barnett, who is actually a lawyer, will be presenting, in addition to some of these folks being there and me being there to support public commenters. And she has said that anyone can reach out to her after that presentation with questions on like that legal nitty gritty and like what does it specifically say, because she has written it. So with that, so the questions we have are, how would SOI discrimination, so source of income discrimination ordinance, be enforced is one of them. And then given that source of income non-discrimination is on the City Commission agenda for next week, what do you all imagine are the next steps if that ordinance change passes, and what if it doesn't?
Yeah, I can speak to both of these questions. So in terms of next steps for the city, oops, sorry, just trying to get my neck kind of comfortable here. I've been like leaning really far forward. If this were, so firstly, the presentation on the 13th is not, the city presumably will not be coming to a vote or anything like that. It is an informational presentation, again, with Katie Burnett, who is the chair of the Human Relations Commission, which is the commission in the city responsible for overseeing discrimination ordinances. She'll just be presenting on changes that were made or changes that we would like to see made to the ordinance, again, in terms of that like nitty gritty, the actual language, what it actually looks like. Following that, presumably the city will come together for another meeting to vote on the ordinance. If it does pass, there will need to be, which Mariel mentioned earlier, a pretty significant push for education, community engagement, ensuring that folks understand what protections the ordinance grants them if they're tenants, in addition to what steps they may need to take to be in compliance with the ordinance if they are landlords. So those materials would need to be created. Additionally, there is kind of a possibility of creating a position or a staff position to help with the enforcement and the overseeing of this ordinance. Currently, as it stands, the Human Relations Commission is the one responsible for receiving discrimination complaints. But part of the changes that we would like to see made is that there's a dedicated staff person to receive and investigate those complaints. And then wait, what was the first part of the question? Sorry, I got lost in my answer.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Let me see what I asked you first. I think
Oh, it was enforcement.
Yeah.
Yes. So coming back to that position, I will say that there are communities that have passed source of income discrimination that do not have strong enforcement or that do not create additional protections, and the ordinance is not effective. So that's part of where the changes to Article 13, which is actually like our city's rental licensing chapter, but there would be changes created in there to support the enforcement of the ordinance, including those inclusive screening guidelines that we talked about earlier, as well as written legal language about, one, how to submit a complaint, two, how that complaint will be investigated, kind of streamlining that process for both landlords and tenants. So ideally, this is passed, or the presentation happens, it's voted on, it's passed. Advocates like ourselves who will be in a position to create education for tenants and landlords will do so while the city begins creating that position and understanding what the work of that position is going to look like and making it accessible to the public.
Yeah, I think I'll just add that, as Gabi said, so Chapter 10 is adding the protected class of source of income. Article 13, which is, I believe, a part of Chapter 7, which is the rental licensing agreement, will be the enforcement piece. So we'll say, if this is violated, how do you report it? What steps and metrics would be as far as accountability measures? And so again, that presentation is crucial to get that content. So again, really encourage December 13th attending that meeting. We'll also, as Gabi said, be disseminating some education pieces and materials to help empower folks, both landlord and tenant, to understand. Because again, this is not a tool of punishment. This is a tool of how can we hold folks accountable to providing good housing and not discriminating just because somebody has a varying source of income. So I think it's a packaged deal, and we cannot simply just have an empty proclamation of we are protecting source of income. We must actually have accountability measures to make it successful.
For next Tuesday night, we will be voting on the source of income.
Oh.
First reading.
Okay.
Adopting first reading, just on the source of income part. And we're also going to provide direction on other aspects of those recommendations.
Oh, well, that is exciting. Then
Yay.
December 13th, everyone. Yeah, exactly. Show up. Thank you for that update. Timelines are always changing, and I always feel like a little bit like I've missed an email even when it happens sometimes. So yeah, December 13th, show up, and Jasmine will be there to support you with public comment.
I will be there, and I'm really pretty friendly. So December 13th is even more important than we were thinking. And I think that, to highlight, like, this has been a long effort to get that on. And I think I'm really grateful that it's going to be coming to a vote rather than just being a reading, because it is something we're trying to get it done, because we have to, you know, create a position, hire somebody, do all this stuff in order to get it to actually be enforceable. So once it gets passed, like, don't stop paying attention. Please keep advocating and keep having these conversations with people. I think we should do at least one more question. Some of these questions I'm not going to select just because they're not, I know the expertise of the panel, and I know it's not necessarily zoning. So there's like some zoning questions and some things that I think are probably better directed to your city commissioners or other experts in the community. So I encourage you to keep engaging with housing experts who are experts in different areas and attending those city and county commission meetings and hearing about that. But I do want to go to, we have a question here about, and I lost it, but it is, what organizations are currently pushing for right to counsel rights? And I think that Gabi talked about it a little bit, right to counsel and legal representation. And I think that that is something that could pair really well with these other changes, but would happen at a different level. To my understanding, it would be more at the county level than the city. So if you all want to address that a little bit.
Can I jump in really quick before and not address this question?
Wow.
But on what was mentioned previously, I think part of the question was what happens if this does pass?
Oh, yeah.
And personally, I don't believe in one-off campaigns or one-off issues. What happens if this does pass is we move forward together, the people in this room and the people we bring along the way, to pass even more robust protections to continue to raise that floor. Like, I do not want anybody to leave this room thinking that the single issue that we're focused on is source of income or inclusive screening. We will continue to fight to make people's lives in this community better. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Kincaid. Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make. Like, don't stop at this. We are talking about these because they're timely, not because they're going to solve it on their own. We need more housing. We need more supports, zoning changes. There's a lot of work to be done. So go ahead with that next question about right to counsel.
Insofar as right to counsel, as I mentioned, I'm working to find funding to fund a one-year pilot program, but that's just a program. It's not necessarily an ordinance. And I don't know that there is an organization in town that's necessarily pushing for a tenant right to counsel ordinance, but I think it would be good. So if there is anyone who would like to push towards that, I would encourage you to do so. And I think a good avenue for that is coming to the county commission and expressing that to commissioners, or just talking to them in your free time.
We have a couple hands raised. How do we feel about taking a couple more questions from the audience? Let's see, what you in the back, what's your question? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. So I see you, Kai. Kai will take your number. I believe Mariel probably has a card over there and a couple other people on this panel.
Take my card.
I think also emailing your city and county commissioners is a good place to start, because they tend to know what's going on and who to plug into. Mariel runs a number, or I think is involved in, you were talking about earlier, a number of meetings that are open to the public and is looking to help compensate members of the public for their expertise. So there are definitely opportunities. It can be tricky to find them with, like, some things are at the county, some things are a nonprofit, some are at a city, but that's an idea.
Yes, if you're interested in supportive housing, in that conversation, you're talking to someone, so I won't interrupt you, but you can talk to me.
Also, no one can do it alone. I feel that, like, I think everyone on this panel has felt that way, like that, like, feeling of like, how do I engage? I can't do it alone. I have so many ideas. No one can. So that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I'll field a couple more. Oh, yes.
I have a question, and that is, what percentage of the non-participating landlords are represented by equity capital, large complex units, whether you talk about in terms of number of units or in percentage of units or percentage of landlords. What percentage of it is out of town equity capital that is creating the issue of not having enough affordable housing?
I can speak to that. So unfortunately, when it comes to non-participating landlords, we don't have the data, but since the majority of landlords are non-participating, I'm just going to speak generally about the data that I have on the distribution of landlords. So about 50% of properties in Lawrence are owned by landlords who have less than 5 properties. So we have like the majority, or not the majority, but about half of our landlords are small property, like smaller landlords, I would consider. However, the majority of our units, I think I got that phrasing confused. The majority of our landlords are small property owners, but the majority of our units are managed by large property management companies.
When you say majority, is that 70%? Is that the kind of number that we're talking about?
Yes, approximately. I don't have so like this is, I went through a rental licensing spreadsheet that was sent to me by the city and kind of just like sorted out who owns what properties, how many people own which property. I don't have the numbers offhand, but my business card is on the table and I'm happy to share that information. Just for anybody, I should have brought my little like landlord statistic brief anticipating that sort of question, but it is a great question. I mean, I think it says a lot that most of our landlords are what we would consider smaller landlords, but most of our units are not managed by those smaller landlords. So there's a lot of power, one, for, again, as Gabi mentioned earlier about a question, when we talk about accountability measures, when we talk about people coming in from out of town, purchasing developments, making developments, we want to make sure that they're not necessarily playing by our rules, but at least like playing by our values, right, as a community. And so that's kind of where these ordinances come in and creating that type of accountability. But yeah, grab my email, shoot me an email, and I'll get more specific numbers if you're curious.
And I will say, just in the experience from the housing authority's perspective, we've seen a increase in turnover of larger apartment complexes or larger units being purchased by outside companies. That has happened incrementally over the last couple of years to where we have lost over 1,000 units from participating landlords in the past year. So it's severe on our side that we're seeing that, and that is not on the smaller landlord piece, that is on the larger. And so I think that's what this source of income speaks to is, again, not a tool of punishment, but a tool of accountability for that percentage of the largest amount of units being owned, and still having that not in community investment necessarily, because you might be outside of the community, and then still saying no, and then me coming to you and being like, but why? And not having a real great reason, because I'll tell you, I will advocate on the phone till I am like blue in the face about how simple it is to be a landlord with us. But we have seen that increase in change, and so it is substantial, and I'm sure the data can back that up.
But I do think we talked earlier about like how many people believe housing is housing is a human right, and we know there's some smaller landlords here. And I want to ask for a show of hands, how many multi-state developers with thousands of units are in the room looking for affordable housing solutions in our community? Raise your hand.
It's me.
It's always
me.
been you.
It's been me the whole time.
Wow. Oh no, Gabi Boyle, multi-state developer. Yeah, so I think that's something that's happening nationwide, right? That's happening in all the communities around the country.
It's a national trend where we're seeing unit, and I think it's because of the advantageous of the increase in rent, but the units being grabbed by your Zillows and your larger companies. It's happening on a national scale, but to speak to the importance of our smaller landlords or those who maybe don't own hundreds and hundreds of units, is I will say they're the ones that I work with and the ones I have a relationship with. And not to say I don't have a relationship with the larger apartment complexes. I think there are certainly some that are investing the time, but the vested interests are the people that are living here. And those are the community members that I'm like, yes, let's talk about it. They're not where I have heartburn.
I see Anju in the back with a hand up.
Now saying that, bigger property management companies are taking over, but not only that, slowly they are just trying to, not renew the leases of people who have, and that is coming up, and it's increasing, and I'm scared about January. Yes. That is also a trend, and not new. I don't know, it's source of income or whatever the reason, but these are the big companies. We don't really know the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Part of the reason that it's so hard to quantify, in the beginning when I gave the presentation with the amount of landlords that participate in rental assistance or that don't accept rental assistance, that non-renewal is part of the reason why it's so hard to quantify, is because what I think folks on this panel can speak to this, what we were seeing is not that folks were being evicted for non-payment of rent with rental assistance, but that it would be accepted once and then their lease wouldn't be renewed, which there's no way to gather data on that. So yeah, I think that's a huge trend. And part of what makes this issue so hard to describe when it comes to getting those really persuasive pieces of data is that non-renewal, isn't filed anywhere, isn't recorded anywhere. Yeah.
I'll just add quickly to what that is, to also acknowledging that you have a question, is with non-renewals and specifically with the Housing Authority, an added piece of what landlords can take advantage of is I am right here. If you were to issue lease violations or have a concern with your tenant, you can call me and we can talk about it, and we set forth an action plan on how to improve on that. So we do not foresee the potential of a non-renewal or lease violation or eviction. So if I can market the fact that, hey, we're not only here to incentivize you and to give you subsidy, but I'm also here for a conversation about how to make sure your housing that you're providing is sustainable to your tenant. That is what we're dedicated to at the Housing Authority as well, that you may not get or probably won't get if you are just leasing outside of that. So it's an added bonus to the whole story. And non-renewals are something that is also a culture shift. We want to shift the culture of what is another alternative to a non-renewal? How do we make the relationship better? Or how do we make sure this is the appropriate housing for that individual?
And with that, I want to highlight that we do have a program that is a partnership between Building Peace, which we have some members of in the audience, including Lisa. I saw someone else who I recognized. Yeah. Some Building Peace representatives who are professional mediators, and it's free for landlords and tenants if the tenant falls within the income requirements, because right now we're grant funded with it, so it does have income requirements. But there's an application on our website, hscdgco.org. That's the Housing Stabilization Collaborative website. So the same place where people go for county rent assistance. There is a free application. It's really pretty easy to fill out. If you think it needs to be easier, let me know. I'll make it easier. And then you don't have to go to court. You don't have to get a lawyer. You just get to talk to Mariel and some other lovely people, and they try to work things out without getting courts or a lot of money from both parties involved, and resolve those issues and hopefully maintain the relationship between the landlord and the tenant, or at least avoid an eviction and try to get that tenant moved into different housing that is more suited for them. So that is a resource that we're trying to push out as much as possible. Did other folks have questions? What Mark is okay, 1 to 2 more. Yeah, I'm seeing it. It is 7:40 and the library does close at 8. So we got to hustle out of here. So raise your hands if you had questions. I see one right here.
I'm a private sector landlord, and I'd like to share some experiences I had with sort of income, real world experiences. People come to me and they'll fill out the application and they'll put income down, their jobs and this and that. But it turns out that they qualify, then it turns out that the job was a temp job. So I think there's going to be a lot of issues about the devil in the details of whatever the commissioners pass and how it's going to be enforced. Because all of a sudden that person no longer qualifies because then the temp job ended. So the source of income thing has a lot of details. It seems like.
Oh. It's definitely very detailed, and I would encourage you to come to that city commission meeting and hear from Katie Barnett on some of those details. And I think that, you know, it's going to be a long road to get to that enforcement and to make sure that it's working for everybody. And really, like, to my understanding, enforcement, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because it's through what's currently called the Human Relations Commission, which is the same entity that accepts like fair housing complaints. So if someone thought that their landlord was racially discriminating against them, that's who they would go to first and complain to. So it would be processed kind of in a similar way. To my understanding, it wouldn't necessarily impact you in that situation that I'm hearing.
And James, I'm happy to talk to you more about that particular instance too. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Kai, I think you had a hand up a while back. Do you still have something, or were you something else? No, okay. And I see you. Yeah.
I actually have been homeless for a while now.
Okay.
I don't look like I'm homeless. I don't dress like I'm homeless. I don't move like I'm homeless.
Louder, please.
I'm definitely homeless.
Would you like to take my mic?
Yeah, sure. If you want me to. I don't know. Does she want me to?
No, you're fine.
Just so other people can
I
hear
just
you.
want to talk.
Yeah.
I want everybody to hear me. So, I've been homeless now since probably July, I guess. And ever since becoming homeless, I have had all sorts of different things go wrong with me. I got back on drugs. I was almost 4 years sober, and I relapsed. I relapsed because I lost hope. I lost hope because I had nothing to hope for. I had nothing to make me want to succeed anymore because I was living in a tent, bro. You spent millions of dollars on tents when you could have redid a building down there. You could have redid an abandoned house somewhere. You could have did something to build something and help us build something, help us create our futures for the next generations. You know, but you got a tent. That fucked me right here. Fucked me. Why am I camping? It's 10 degrees outside. So you know what they did to me? Kicked me out. Took all my stuff, even my son's stuff that was in my tent. They threw it in the dumpster because I didn't like it. They didn't like it. They did that to me. And you know what? That knocked me down, and I got right back up and I kept on going. I squat in a laundry room. Squat. No toilet. No sink. Nothing. I sleep on a cardboard box. When I go to sleep, because half the time I don't even go to sleep. My feet hurt so bad. There's so many sores on them. They hurt so bad. Because I walk all night because I'm scared. Scared. Because I don't have a safe place to sleep. I don't have a safe place, and I'm a woman. I'm a fucking woman, dude. I'm a woman. I am walking these streets with these perverts. They're gonna take from me and take from me and take from me and take from me and take from me over and over. And then I get kicked out of places because I'm upset. And I'm sad and I'm angry. I want to do anything. It's okay. But it's like, I'm passionate and I get emotional. I'm sorry.
You're fine. No, thank you.
I'm so sorry for that.
I'm surprised I haven't at this point, if I haven't, so you're doing fine.
And I'm so angry because I see so many things that can be done, you know, to help homeless people. And I'm not speaking for every homeless person in Lawrence. I'm not. I'm speaking on me.
Yeah.
I'm thinking this is my experience. You know, there's so many different things that we can do together, to come together as one, to unite, to fight together, to be better, you know? But as long as you're packing us in tents, we're not gonna do nothing but be complacent, and we're gonna stay right there. We're gonna stay right there and we're gonna do what we do, because that's what we do. We do what we do. We're having fun, yeah, sometimes. I don't really have that much fun. I have fun sometimes, but
Yeah.
I just keep yawning. You know? He's wanting me to shut up. I'm so sorry. I will sit and talk forever. I love to talk, and I love to talk about things that I'm passionate about. There's also harm reduction centers. That needs to be brought to Lawrence. Bring that to Lawrence.
Yeah.
And
That treatment and recovery
you-
center,
you
yeah.
don't want- I don't want my child, my children are grown. I don't want them to walk by and see somebody's dirty needle on the ground. Give me a box to put that in. Help me get clean supplies. You know, I don't want to pass around diseases, disease control, safe use. These are all things that help homeless people in Denver.
Yeah.
Denver has an amazing homeless program. Amazing. Learn from them. Learn from the bigger cities. Become that.
Yes.
Be one. We can all grow and become something.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Those are really great comments. Thank you so much.
If you want to chat after this, It's 8 o'clock, so maybe we could talk about it.
I just wanted to briefly bring up that harm reduction is actually, fentanyl test strips are considered drug paraphernalia.
We're losing our
I-
kids every day from that.
I hear you, and there is a Narcan shortage right now. There's a Narcan. I totally agree. I completely agree. We ask for Narcan every day, and we can't get enough of it. And I completely agree, and we hear you.
Then he just wait. If you can't
I
teach them
agree.
anything, then he just wait. I know the ways, but you teach them, or let me teach them. Let me be the voice. Let me teach everybody.
We hear
What can you do if you don't have Narcan? Does anybody know? I know. Cold water, ice up the butt. Like, come on, now. CPR. Learn it. You're gonna do it, then learn how to take care of your people.
We hear you.
You're right.
We hear you. You're right.
And I want to say, I'm so glad that you took this mic and spoke, because you talked about harm reduction, which is one of like the key things that our city needs to be doing right now to protect some of the most vulnerable.
Yes.
And that is why it is important that certain people's voices that are most impacted have the microphone. So thank you.
Yeah, and I want,
Love you. I would just want to go home and
Yeah.
and
I want
Are there
you-
any openings at the co-ops, Kincaid? I mean,
I was gonna say, I wanted to extend our information to you, because you would be a voice that we need in those spaces and in those meetings. So
And we
You
need
wanna say
people like
something?
you. Exactly. We need your voice.
Shelter turned me down. Me and my son. I'm a single
Oh.
parent. Turned me down. You know what? My son's too old. Now you tell me how my 17-year-old child is too old. He's a child. He's my baby.
I hear
You tell
you.
me how we were denied. We were denied housing, but there's single men out there. Single men living in houses with free rent for a year.
I hear you.
It's disgusting. He's fucking disgusting. I just want to spin his face every time I look at him. It's disgusting. But me, I had to send my son to live with somebody else. Some other woman had to care for my son. You know, I had to push my pride down and ask another woman to take care of my child. It's messed up, man.
I hear you.
That's just living here.
And I wish our community had more resources for everybody.
You help that single man. You think you helped him? He has no children. Ain't never made baby.
and I want to thank you again for your comments. And I think we are getting close to the library closing, and we're going to need to wrap up. But I think that you should definitely connect to Mariel, and anyone else who feels really passionate about these issues should make sure they connect and get in some of those meetings where these decisions are being made. Go talk to your city commission, your county commission, get on these work groups where, you know, this has been worked on for 2 years. There's more solutions starting to be worked on now. So get involved now and have a voice in those discussions. And thank you for taking the first step of being here tonight. Let's give our audience a little round of applause for showing up for us. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
And I think we have our business cards on that back table, as well as that email sign-up sheet if you want more information. Stay in touch with us.
Oh, sure. Hey. I actually don't have a card.
I don't know. I never had such a thing. I mean, I know that. But.
Yeah, definitely. I think that I would let me just, we'll do it old fashioned. If you just want to give me your number.
Yeah, that's fine. Here, I'm really better. I don't answer my phone a lot, so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. No, I can give you either my email or